My husband refuses to respect my boundaries, and I can no longer continue making the effort. Me, 34F, setting firm boundaries with my husband, 34M, may mean the end of my marriage. What should I do? I've been married to a smart, cute, witty, wonderful man for 5 years, dated him for 6 years prior to that, and known him as a friend for 5 years before that. He has been a part of my life for so long it's hard to remember what my life was like before he was in it in some capacity. I love him dearly, and I love the life we've built together. He doesn't handle his frustration or anger or insecurities well. He has a lot of trust issues, despite the fact that I haven't done anything to merit distrust, which he will acknowledge. His trust issues stem from legitimate childhood trauma, and will frequently presume worst intentions. Sometimes he might see something small and his brain will draw conclusions like, wife hasn't put the dishes away, even though I never asked it, and there are plenty of times I don't put dishes away. Therefore she doesn't respect me or prioritize our relationship. Frequently in arguments, his feelings will take precedence over my own. I do my very best to listen to his feelings and acknowledge/empathize with them. But in the heat of the moment very frequently my own feelings become things for him to react to rather than listen to, and thus the discussion about his feelings continue while mine never get addressed. We've been in couples counseling for years now. Originally it was more of a maintenance thing, but over the past year it has become critically necessary. My husband sunk into a really deep depression last spring, and last summer was honestly pretty hellish for both of us. He'd find fault in the smallest of slights, like she asked me a question via IM but there's read receipt, so clearly she didn't care about my answer and doesn't care about me when I actually had seen the answer and it didn't mark a read receipt because I only looked at it through my phone's notifications, and then stopped talking to me for multiple days on end except for practical house questions via IM. He'd send passive-aggressive and manipulative messages while I was out to get me to come home, though he doesn't intend for them to be manipulative. They definitely fit the definition by any reasonable standard. If things are very extreme, he may scream in my face or knock something over. In previous years, he has punched the wall before, or, lightly, pushed me out of the way in an argument so he could get past me. I did a lot of supporting him emotionally, and often financially, when he would let me. If he's stressed, I'll try to do some housework to take something off his plate, or offer to pick up food he likes, or we'll cuddle together and watch something he likes that I don't really care about. I'll hold him while he cries. I'll pick up the slack and I don't hold resentment about it. That's what partners do. But in the last few months, I've been going through a depression of my own. I don't lash out, but sometimes I get really sad and desperately need support. And it feels like when he's able to offer support, it very frequently comes back to haunt me later. For example, me feeling sad, him offering to pick up my favorite pizza and me taking him up on it, only for him to send me messages about how stressful and frustrating it is because the pizza wasn't ready in time and the other customers are being jerks, and by the time he gets home he's done and can't be near anyone for a while. Most recently I was having a really bad day, and he was there for me, held me while I cried, did some housework, talked me through some things, and that evening I was starting to feel a little stable. And out of nowhere he hit me with some passive-aggressive comments and started talking about how his needs, which he had not communicated to me, hadn't been met all day, and how I don't meet his needs in other ways and how I prioritize everyone else in my life but not him. And I was floored and devastated, because I do prioritize him, probably more than I prioritize myself, which I'm trying to change since that isn't healthy. I think about what he wants or needs or might think of something practically all the time. But also, it was one more example of how I can't truly lean on him. I can't trust that he'll be able to support me emotionally even when he says he can. Later that same night our basement flooded, and he found it first. All I heard was slamming doors and yelling, so I went downstairs to check, and when I asked what was going on, he screamed at me, basically in my face, "What the fuck do you think?" Y'all, I'm bad at boundaries. I'm really bad at them. I'm always afraid people will be mad at me or leave me when I set them, and I have plenty of real examples to back up that fear, so it's not exactly unwarranted. Over the summer, during therapy, I set some explicit boundaries of things that were not okay in arguments, things like screaming, throwing things, passive-aggressive comments, etc. I've tried, since setting those boundaries, to make it known when they were crossed, saying ouch or that wasn't an okay thing to say or I need to leave the room until we can discuss this calmly. Every inch of enforced boundaries has been painful and really hard, but I'm trying. But the screaming, and especially right after the day of supporting me and then lashing out at me without warning after, was one thing too many. We're in a crisis right now, because, among other things, I've set a firm boundary around the screaming. It can't ever happen again. It just can't. Some people in my life who have been in abusive relationships have pointed out to me that screaming in someone's face is abusive and violent even if it's not physical violence. But when I speak to my husband about it, he feels that setting this boundary is setting him, and our relationship, up to fail. He doesn't feel like he can guarantee he won't do it again, and that if this is truly a hard boundary for me, that we should end our relationship. He knows the way he's been treating me is not okay. He feels remorse for treating me that way. I know that I'm not perfect and I have work to do of my own, among other things, setting and enforcing boundaries, and untwisting myself from the pretzel shape I've become to accommodate my husband's needs/wants. And in this list of problems, I haven't mentioned all of the good things. As with any post like this, there are amazing, positive things in our relationship too. We share values, politically and personally. We play video games together and travel together and have fun together and care deeply about each other. He can be so kind and lovely. He's passionate about doing good and helping other people. Is it reasonable for me to have this hard boundary? Obviously, with or without that particular boundary, we are really struggling right now and may or may not be able to make this work. I keep thinking if the boundary was you can never hit me again instead of you can never scream in my face again, no one would think that was an unreasonable boundary. Even if the hitting happened rarely, as the screaming has. It seems to me that if someone can't guarantee they'll be able to manage their anger enough to not scream in someone's face, anger management therapy might be necessary. And I don't mean this flippantly, he apparently found out recently that he also has high blood pressure, so this seems like a potential health issue as well. I brought this up as an option and got no response. I don't want my marriage to end. I didn't say those vows lightly. The idea of breaking up this relationship feels like I'm being torn apart. But I can't stay with things the way they are. I can't. And it feels like he's saying things are not going to change quickly. That he wants to change, but it's going to be a journey. I don't know what to do. Update me, 34F, setting firm boundaries with my husband, 34 meters, may mean the end of my marriage. What should I do? So, the first thing I want to do, before giving my update, is to thank all of you for chiming in. It can be really hard for me to be confident in my own perception of the world and of reality, and being able to get input from total strangers was enormously helpful. My update, I stuck firm to the boundary I set. In addition, I told him that what I needed from him was 1. For him to go to anger management therapy or some other immediate intervention help. 2. For him to find a way to be a supportive partner to me when I'm having a hard time and have that not turn into being all about his own needs. And 3. For him to not only tolerate but actively encourage me to set boundaries, at least in the short term. I told him that essentially, my trust in his ability to respect my boundaries was broken and that rebuilding that trust would take a lot of work, including him supporting and encouraging boundaries even if he didn't like them or felt they were overcorrections, which he was saying that this no screaming hard boundary was. After a lot of back and forth of him essentially telling me he didn't know what I wanted from him, despite me articulating the above several times, while alternatively and continually pushing back on many parts of what I was asking for, and in the meantime him continuing to occasionally get upset and send manipulative, passive-aggressive messages and not respect boundaries I was setting in the moment, I told him that something drastic needed to change. I asked him for a separation, but told him I wanted to continue to work on our relationship and date through the separation. I felt that separating might be the only way he and I had a chance of saving our relationship, because living together was doing continual damage that was going to be hard to recover from. He said he needed some time to think on it. A week later he came back to therapy with me and told me he no longer wanted to be married or in a relationship with me at all. That was devastating enough on its own. At first we were kind with each other, even had a few nights of hanging out and commiserating over our shared grief. He asked for 3 months to get his finances in order before moving out, and I agreed. But then one night last weekend he picked a fight with me and again started sending manipulative, passive-aggressive messages. I thought he might have been drunk, so I messaged in the morning, but he doubled down and said even worse things. I stayed out as much as possible for the rest of the weekend, but Monday morning he was stomping around the house getting ready for work, screaming at the cat, slamming doors, and I was hiding in bed and flinching at every noise. I ended up taking a sick day because I was such a mess. That day I messaged him and told him that he was behaving in an emotionally abusive way and that I didn't feel safe in the house with him, and that we needed to revisit our timeline for him moving out. I also told him that I had been terrified to tell him this, that I was shaking even sending the message. He minimized his behavior, acted incredulous, and asked how soon. I told him end of April. He freaked out and said he needed until July. Then he did a complete 180, said a friend would lend him the money and he'd be out by early April. He spent all week packing and visiting apartments, and now he's moving out this Sunday. Which is a little bit of a relief, but is also such a strong rubber banding move that I'm certain it's him attempting to take control of the situation, and I'm sure his story to everyone else is that I don't care about his pain and am kicking him out early. Anyway, that pretty much brings us up to speed. I've been coming to terms, slowly, with the fact that I've been in an emotionally abusive relationship for years. Sometimes I feel horribly guilty, like I didn't do enough to try and save things, or like I'm making a big deal out of nothing and now I'm throwing my life away. I did have a really wonderfully validating one-on-one session with our couples therapist who reassured me that my perception of the situation is accurate and I'm not the one who did this to us. Sometimes I'm just incredibly heartbroken and lonely. Sometimes I'm angry that he didn't care enough to try and work at it. But I think it's likely that ultimately, this ending is for the best, as awful as that feels. Again, I really want to thank everyone here who responded to my original post. Some of the advice and comments were really hard to read, but they were really important for me to read. It was so helpful knowing I had a bunch of internet strangers backing me up on some level. I think some of my ex's minimizing has caused me to feel really unsure about how I'm perceiving the situation, potentially even gaslighting. Though likely unintentional, so having folks who could confirm that what was happening was not okay was vital. I'm lucky to have a good support system locally as well, so as awful as this all is, I might just get through it okay. Update number 2, me, 34F, setting firm boundaries with my husband, 34 meters, may mean the end of my marriage. What should I do? Edit, thank you for the outpour of support in the comments. So amazing to read. I love y'all. Less than 3. I wanted to give y'all another update, hopefully the last one. It's been about a year since my original post, 10 months since the first update. My ex did move out. Thankfully, moving day was uneventful. And then he was gone. And as many commentators predicted, when he was gone from the house, it was a huge relief. I didn't have to cringe at every little sound anymore. I could breathe again. I was really sad, but my space was my own. And then I got laid off. No joke. Hell of a 1-2 punch right there. The past 2 years have, on the whole, been incredibly painful. The year that my marriage fell apart, and then the year I had to spend recovering from that blow. I had to job hunt while mourning the death of my relationship. And as soon as I found a new job, I also found out my house needed hugely expensive repairs that, after all of this mess, as well as having supported my ex not working for a year, I just didn't have the cash for. And figuring out how to be on my own for a while. I had people there to support me, but in the day-to-day, hour to hour through this mess, I was ultimately on my own. And that was hard. Binging The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel helped a bit. He also kept reaching out. For a while it was occasionally chatty, but as time went on and I came more to terms with how he treated me, and how frequently his messages had a tinge of emotional manipulation to them, I distanced myself. He messaged me once to ask if I regretted our entire relationship, on the whole, or if I thought he was a terrible person, on the whole. I didn't respond to that one at all. Then he'd reach out with things like, hey, the TV I took from our living room broke, do you want it from me? Like to sell or try and fix? I've been doing my best to keep my responses short and clear, in ways that don't invite follow-up. Lately he's been wanting to have a post-mortem conversation, to which I said that I wouldn't be ready to consider whether or not that'd be a good idea until our legal ties were ended. He also just messaged to ask if he could be my roommate, because his rent is really high. I have no words. The good news, and there's thankfully quite a lot of it, the new job I got is possibly the best job I've ever had. A step down in salary, but I'm super happy with the work and the people and the location. And I've been getting rave reviews from coworkers and management. Enough that I think I can probably negotiate a decent raise in a few months. I had to get a new car as well, new to me, but purchased used, since my ex got the car we shared in the split, and I was nervous about negotiating and buying a car by myself, which I'd never done before. But I did it and managed to negotiate the dealer about $1,000 down, and I absolutely love the car. Also, I met someone new. This person reminds me of my ex in a lot of ways, things like shared hobbies and creativity and sense of humor and charm, but very different in some really important ways. He treats me really well. He's thoughtful and kind and generous, not just to me, but to everyone. In the conflicts we've had, very few, we are able to talk through them calmly, no yelling. And he shows me how much he respects and cares about my perspective and boundaries and autonomy. He's not broken and doesn't need me to fix him, and I'm not broken either. Thank God. Maybe carrying a bit of extra baggage, but such is life. This relationship is still new, but it feels like a game changer for both of us, and I'm excited to see where it leads. And one more bit of good news, I will officially be divorced on Friday. Yes, the day after Valentine's Day XD, there are a few more loose ends to wrap up after that, but not many. I wanted to provide this update in part because I know it can be nice to see updates from folks, but also because I wanted to give a bit of hope to anyone who might be in a situation like mine. It can get better. It really can. I'm actually happy. It took time and hard work, and things aren't perfect. I'm definitely going to need a lot of time to recover financially, and I'm still sometimes processing the weight of 11 years of emotional abuse, A+ for therapy, but I'm actually truly happy. Sometimes I wonder how much of the depression I'd been feeling before he left was the result of how much emotional weight I'd been carrying for so long as in mine without truly being aware of it. It's so easy to feel like that dark tunnel is all there ever will be, when you're in the middle of it, but I'm out in the sunshine now, and it feels amazing.